Call to order the February 6, 2025 meeting of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. This meeting is being streamed live, public to attend, and recorded as a public record. The recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. At this time, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Tom Haislip to lead us in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Tom Berry for our invitation. Commissioner Berry.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to gather together as commissioners of the Wildlife Resources Commission. Enlighten us and guide us in making sound decisions today for the preservation of the natural resources of our great state. Collectively, we serve on different committees, and these committees address concerns of our area of expertise. Give us the wisdom that we need to listen and learn and lead us all in the proper direction for the preservation of these resources. We are entering trying times, and your guidance is needed. Also, dear Heavenly Father, the western part of our state is going through significant challenges from the hurricane and cold weather, not only from a human trials and tribulation, but from the natural resources that are our responsibility. We're all in need of your guidance, and dear Father, let us not forget the western part of our country that are dealing with the recovery from wildfire and with similar issues. Bless us, guide us, direct us, forgive us for our many sins, Heavenly Father. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Berry. It's time I'd like to call on Lauren Meekler, do a roll call for Commissioners present. Arda.
Good morning. I'm going to do a roll call for commissioners present for February 6, 2025 meeting. Bonnie Crump.
Here.
Mark Craig.
Here.
David Hoyle. Here. John Coley. Wes Seegers.
Here.
Tommy Fumble. Tom Berry.
Here.
Brad Stanback.
Here.
Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton. Kelly Davis. Here. Steve Wyndham.
Here.
Landon Zimmer.
Here.
John Stone.
Here.
Hayden Rogers. John Alexander.
Here.
Tom Haislip.
Here.
J.C. Cole. Mike Alford.
Here.
Joe Budd.
Here.
Reed Smith. Mr. Chairman, you have.
Thank you. North Carolina General Statute 138A-15 mandates that the commission chair shall remind all commissioners of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest or appearances of conflict under this chapter. The chair also inquires as to whether there is any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to the commission. It's time. It is the where it's a personal conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict to notify the chair of the same. And this time I'll ask, are there any refusal by commission for any items coming before the commission today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the order to avoid the appearance of a conflict, I'd like to recuse myself from line item D2.
Thank you, Commissioner Zimmer. Are there any more recusals by any other commissioners at this time? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Next item on the agenda is approved the December 5th, 2024 minutes of the Wildlife Commission. You have previously received these in your packet. Or in this time, I ask for any additional corrections at this time with minutes of the December 5th meeting. Motion approved. There's second.
Second.
Motion approved. Second. Seegers. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption of the minutes of the December 5th, 2024 meeting, signify saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approved. Thank you. At this time, I call and recognize Jason Cottle, Chief Financial Officer, to present our financial status report. This time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'll begin by presenting to you all Exhibit B, which will demonstrate our, as of December 31st, 24, our revenues, expenditures, and fund balance in both the general fund and capital improvement funds. Overall revenues in our general fund were $89,928,660.93. Total expenditures in the same, $88,567,500.58, leaving us a fund balance as of December 31 of $30,104,030.71. In our capital improvement fund, total revenues as of this point in time were $6,928,437.94. Excuse me. Total expenditures in the same, $5,152,706.94, leaving us a fund balance of $6,465,283.52. Now, what I'd like to do on the next couple of slides is similar to what I did yesterday during the Finance Audit and Compliance Committee. Each time we meet, I present to you the revenues, expenditures, and fund balance and just kind of glance over them quickly. So I'd like to show you what makes up each of those categories, at least for the general fund. Of the 89 million collected year-to-date revenue, we can see that about a quarter of that is represented as federal reimbursement. Throughout the course of the year, that'll pan out to be closer to 33%. But as it stands right now, we're looking at about 25% collected year-to-date of federal funds. Appropriations make up only about 13% of our revenue. We can see that fees, licenses, and fines, think hunting and fishing licenses, vessel registrations, comprise about a third of what we've collected year to date. And about 7% is made up of sales and services, and you can think of that as typically our partnerships with municipalities and local governments. Moving along to our expenditures in the general fund. Of the 88.5 million realized year to date, the largest chunk that you see here in blue and orange represents personal services and employee benefits. So I highlight that to show that our largest expense and greatest investment is always going to be our staff. Doesn't matter what equipment we acquire, what lands we may purchase, employee human resources is always going to be our most valuable investment. I did not present these slides for the capital improvement fund just because the activity there's far less activity and it's much less varied and less complex than what we see in our general fund. Are there any questions about what's been presented thus far? Okay, moving on to our endowment fund, and this will be a repeat of what was presented yesterday afternoon. Fund balance as of December 31, 2024 was just shy of 204 million. To be exact, it's $203,975,837.04. Again, we see about 31.7 million represented in our short-term holdings. That's about 15.5%. And the remaining almost 85% is in our equity investments of 172.26 million at this time. Again, I want to highlight that we've got expendable income earned of almost $72 million, 71.99. And once we factor in our known obligations, that leaves us with about 38.2 million remaining. Are there any questions about the data presented? Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jason. At this time, I recognize Director Briggs for a presentation of 2024 Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, Commissioners. It's my pleasure to present one of the Wildlife Commission's most prestigious awards, the Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award. This award is presented to someone who has made outstanding contributions to wildlife diversity and their habitats in North Carolina and considered a leader in wildlife resources conservation. Today, we are honoring the 19th Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award recipient. Dr. Reed Wilson Laney is well known for his special passion for Atlantic sturgeon and American eel, as well as his passion for mentorship of future biologists. In thinking of what I wanted to say about my friend and colleague, I reread his nomination, and I can think of no better description of Wilson than what was written. Wilson is a kind, intelligent, and energetic force for conservation. He has worked and continues to work tirelessly for the conservation of North Carolina's biological communities. He is a great teacher and provides a stellar example for young conservationists. He is very deserving of the Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award. Wilson's here with his wife, Gail, and colleagues, Alvin Braswell and Ann Barry Summers, also award winners. And with that, Wilson, I'd like you to come forward, and Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to read the resolution.
Yes.
Resolution of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission honoring Dr. Reed Wilson Laney. Whereas Dr. Reed Wilson Laney is a highly respected conservationist who has worked diligently to promote and foster wildlife diversity throughout North Carolina. And whereas Wilson's work has and continues to encompass and positively impact a broad range of species and habitats. And whereas Wilson has conducted valuable work on Atlantic white cedar swamps in eastern North Carolina related to isolated and limited flow wetlands, which provided insight on the value of these wetland habitats in North Carolina and beyond. And whereas Wilson provided invaluable contributions to establishing seasonal flows in the Roanoke River Basin for the benefit of anadromous fisheries. And whereas Wilson is considered an authority on the federally listed Atlantic sturgeon and effectively advocates for their conservation and the expansion of existing populations. And whereas Wilson has served and provided leadership for numerous committees critical to the restoration of diverse ecological communities, including the Commission's Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee, Roanoke River Water Flow Committee, Multi-Agency Lake Mattamuskeet Team, Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Committee, and the South Atlantic Marine Fisheries Council. And whereas Wilson continues through retirement as a volunteer to document the distribution of reptiles, amphibians, and freshwater mollusks throughout North Carolina. And whereas Wilson has and continues to provide visionary leadership for the conservation of North Carolina's wildlife heritage and inspire future conservation leaders. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission does hereby pay tribute to Dr. Reed Wilson Laney for his outstanding contributions to the citizens of North Carolina through his continuing commitment to the conservation of the state's wildlife diversity. And be it further resolved that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission expresses its profound gratitude to Wilson and presents him with the Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award for his exemplary leadership in the enhancement and conservation of North Carolina's non-game wildlife resources. This resolution, introduced by Chairman Monty Crump, was unanimously seconded and passed by the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission in a meeting duly assembled on February 6, 2025 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Wilson, congratulations. And we have a few things for you. We have a plaque commemorating the award, as well as a print that you may recognize. Ken Bridle did this, and of course, there are 3 species on here. We have cyprinidae fish, so minnows, where at a young age, Wilson described falling in a hole while wading in Wilson's Creek, discovered small fish, and fully committed to his future to fish biology. We have a white line sphinx mole, and I understand that as a child, you were raising them until they ended up eating your mom's plants. And then lastly, a spotted salamander. And for those of you that don't know, the last few years, Wilson has been working with Alvin Braswell to study salamanders and inform listing decisions. So, Wilson, congratulations. Thank you so much for all that you did.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Chairman Crump and Commissioners, Director Briggs and staff, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. I don't often get this opportunity, so I'm going to take advantage of it. Thank you for this honor, and I want to let you know that it's immensely gratifying to join so many other past recipients, a couple of whom are in the room with us today. The vast majority of those folks are people that I count as close colleagues and I've worked with for many, many years. Many, if all of them have, many, if not all of them, have been mentors to me as I have sought to mentor other colleagues and students in the conservation field. I haven't done very much by myself during the course of my career. I have most often served with teams of colleagues who have encouraged the work I was doing, who aided it, and who mentored me in the process. I want to thank the commission, both the commissioners and the staff members with whom I've been privileged to work directly through the years, for creating this award for biodiversity and bestowing it annually. I can't tell you how much it means to my peers and to the community at large. A good many of the WRC staff I've worked with are retired now or have departed this world, but their names I think some of you would still recognize: Don Baker and Stuart Critcher in particular, way back. Suffice it to say that the total list is a very long one. I actually started naming all the WRC staff that I've worked with through the years, and Shannon said, you can't do that, it's too long, cut that part out. So I did, but I will acknowledge those folks at some point later. I have collaborated with individuals in just about all the commission divisions, in fisheries mostly, of course, but also in wildlife management, with Brad and his staff in habitat conservation, in enforcement and communications marketing and digital engagement. I was privileged to know Tom Quay at NC State University. I never took his ornithology course, but after he retired, I worked with him a lot in the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnership, back then known as the Albemarle-Pamlico Estuary Study. And one of the things that I did for Tom was that my wife Gail and I would often encounter Tom at the University Club for dinner. He would always call me over and say, Wilson, are these really scallops that I'm eating tonight or not? Are they something else? So I helped him out with scallop identification. I want to personally thank those commissioners with whom I've been privileged to work most closely during the course of my career. And there are 4 of you here that I wanted to thank personally. That's Tom Berry, Mark Craig, Kelly Davis, and Wes Seegers. Tom, I was erroneously thinking that you were Ann's big sister. I mean, Ann was your little sister, but you all let me know that I had that backwards, and you were actually younger than Ann. So you're her, not her little brother, but her younger brother. So one of the things that I appreciate, and I'm sure Ann appreciates, is the work that you and the Land Acquisition Committee have done in your capacity as chair of that committee. The more of the landscape that you all assemble and conserve for elk, the more you protect for the entire ecosystem and for the people of North Carolina. And that work is just hugely appreciated. Mark Craig, I cannot say enough about what a pleasure it has been to work with you during my tenure on the NC Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee and in your capacity as the chair of the Non-Game and Endangered Species Committee. Your support and enthusiasm for the NWAC and its work, as well as your attendance and interaction with us in person and your chairing that committee, is much appreciated. Thank you so much for that. Kelly Davis, I won't say how long you and I have known each other, but as fellow Fish and Wildlife Service retirees, I know you share my love of Mattamuskeet and Mattamuskeet National Wildlife Refuge, and I look forward to our continued collaboration for many years to come with respect to Mattamuskeet restoration. And finally, Wes, it has been and continues to be a privilege to serve with you on the NC Wildlife and Outdoor Recreation Foundation board. And for those of you who don't know, that organization is the first friends group, I think, for the commission, similar to friends groups in other states that have been very beneficial to their programs as well. So thank you for what you've done with the foundation. Wes and I were discussing downstairs another idea that he has that I would love to see get implemented. So I'm looking forward to working with him on that one. The work that all of you do as commissioners is immensely important. As far as I'm concerned, you all are like God's stewards for creation care in the state of North Carolina. And I thank you and I appreciate the work that you all do. Thank you for this tremendous honor. And I have one more thank you to extend on behalf of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, on whose board I've been privileged to serve during my retirement, and Ann also serves on that board. My understanding is that many of you are members and contributors to the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. And for that, we thank you very much as well. Our CEO and our staff appreciate your participation. I think that the collaboration between the Federation and the Commission has been a long and beneficial one, and I very much look forward to seeing that continue. Thank you.
Brief break pictures at this time. Be right back. What goes in? These are reports. At this time, I'd like to recognize Chairman Tom Berry of the Land Acquisition and Property Committee. And Berry, jump to the fish. Okay. Let's see, Fisheries Committee, John Stone.
Thank you, Commissioner Crump. Meeting was called to order on February 5th, 10 a.m. Christian Waters presented 2026-2027 fishing rule proposal, which address fishing and impoundments that are hatchery supported trout waters. Boundary changes to public mountain trout waters, largemouth bass, white bass, no fishing during spawning season in the Kings Bridge Slough, and prohibiting transport and possession of golden mussel. Seth Micah, District 5 Fisheries Biologist, discussed how Piedmont municipal lakes are hidden gems for great largemouth bass fishing. He discussed commission fisheries management activities such as conducting fish surveys and installing fish habitat, including artificial structures and native aquatic vegetation. Also highlighted the ease of access and amenities make for a great fishing experience for any angler. Christian Waters then presented on NC Division Marine Fisheries proclamation to close the spotted sea trout season in coastal and joint fishing waters until June 15th, 2025, due to recent cold stunt natural mortality events. After a discussion of potential options for commission action, the committee voted unanimously for staff to prepare a temporary rule to close the harvest season for spotted sea trout in inland fishing waters and joint fishing when taken by hook and line until June 15th. The proposed temporary rule will be considered later in this meeting. And then discussed how NCDMF is reviewing striped bass data through 2024 for the Neuse and Far River basins to determine if the populations are self-sustaining and what effect the gill net closure above the ferry line has had. Staff will provide future updates to the committee. Corey Oakley discussed restoration efforts following Hurricane Helene at both Armstrong and Bobby Setzer State Fish Hatcheries. Because of fish loss at Armstrong, 2025 trout stockings will need to be reduced by 20%. Corey then mentioned that the Better Fishing with Two Bald Biologists podcast will now include video placed on the agency's YouTube channel and used for other marketing and communication efforts. With no additional topic, the meeting was adjourned at 11:04. That concludes my report.
Are there any other questions or comments? Report from the Fisheries Committee? Hearing none, I recognize Chairman Tom Berry of the Land Acquisition Property.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Land Acquisition and Property Committee, met yesterday and, at 9 a.m. Anyway, the committee began by reviewing 2026-26 land and water access rule proposals. Committee also reviewed and approved 3 phase 1 land acquisition proposals and 2 phase 2 land acquisition proposals and 2 other property matters. I concluded the meeting by reminding the committee of 2 important ongoing projects in the mountain region that would establish new game land: the Turkey Ridge Callaway Mountain Project and the Hickory Nut Mountain Project. Neither project would be possible without our valued conservation partner. These are really 2 significant tracts, and it's a total of about 4,000 acres that's coming to us. So it's a really big deal. I want to keep you abreast of how that evolves and develops. I also want to comment in summary that we addressed and set in place the acquisition of over 1,500 acres yesterday to the tune of over $10 million. Big deal. And that since last meeting, I've met with Mike Leonard and both Will Robbins, Mike Leonard with the Conservation Fund and Will Robbins with the TNC, the Nature Conservancy, to discuss funding for future projects. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any comments, questions? Committee report? Land acquisition. Hearing none, at this time, I recognize Chairman David Hoyle of the Big Game Committee.
Big Game Committee met yesterday. Chief Brad Howard shared the Wildlife Management Division's big game rule proposals for the upcoming rule cycle. Most proposals are aimed at moving into a CWD management phase in our CWD areas in the 2026 year season. Establishing these rules will be helpful for us to how we address CWD on the landscape and maintain our hunter support in these areas. In better deer news, staff is recommending that we move to full season either sex in 6 western deer season counties and the final 3 counties of the northwestern deer season. These changes highlight the continued improvement in deer numbers on private lands in the west. Next, Miranda Turner, our wildlife health biologist, gave us an update on the status of CWD in our state. We detected 8 new positive deer last deer season, but all were within the current positive counties, so no new surprises on that. And finally, Colleen gave us a deer and bear season preliminary harvest numbers. We had a great year in both species with the second highest deer harvest on record and another record harvest on bears. Having no further business, we adjourn.
Are there any questions? Big Game Committee report. Hearing none at this time, I'll recognize Chairman Zimmer for the Finance Audit and Compliance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, Finance Audit and Compliance Committee convened at 1:30 p.m. February 5th, 2025. Internal Audit Director Elizabeth Davis presented a thorough overview of the internal audit strategic plan, detailing its development process as well as current goals. The committee was updated on the status of all current engagements as well as their anticipated completion timeline, noting that the addition of a new internal audit position is currently underway. Lastly, an action plan update was provided to the committee, laying out the timeline for implementing the corrective actions to items identified during previous internal audit reviews. Next, Chief Financial Officer Jason Cottle presented the committee with a comparison of current and prior year expenditure and revenue figures in both the general and capital improvement funds, highlighting any variances in excess of $1 million. An update was provided as to the current balance of the agency's endowment fund and its current asset allocation. The committee will continue to monitor the fund's performance closely and determine if any adjustments need to be made to current allocation. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chairman Zimmer. Are there any questions? Finance Audit and Compliance Committee report today. Hearing none, I'll present. Move report to committee of the whole. Committee of the whole met yesterday afternoon and began with Brad Howard presenting route proposals for changes to the spring great squirrel season and to establish biologically sensitive time periods for the 2026-27 annual review cycle. Next, Betsy Haywood reviewed the proposed rule and public comments received for changes to the water safety rules for White Lake, Bladen County. Following that, Carrie Rubin reviewed the proposed rule and public comments received for temporary rule vessel deliveries Lake Norman and Catawba, Iredell, Lincoln, and Mecklenburg counties. Being no further business, committee adjourned at 2:28. Are there any comments or questions about the report? Hearing none, we'll move forward to agency spotlight. This time I'll call on Brad Howard to introduce our speaker, Mr. Doug Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to introduce Doug Howe. Doug is our migratory game bird coordinator. He oversees all of our migratory game bird operations from mourning doves to Canada geese. And Doug's going to present. Doug put together a really great presentation for our monthly science program that we do internally, talking about the history and status of Canada geese. And we thought that this would make an excellent spotlight for the commissioners. I think you guys will enjoy this presentation. And this is a bit of a condensed version of what he did before. So I'm just going to turn it over to Doug. I think everybody kind of knows Doug. So hope you enjoy this one.
Thank you, Brad. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, and guests. As Brad mentioned, I'm going to talk about the history and status of Canada geese in North Carolina. But before I do that, I think the more appropriate title might be A Tale of Two Goose Populations, the Demise of One and the Rise of Another. And I think that'll be apparent as I go through the presentation. So our tale, so to speak, begins in the early part of the 20th century when most North Carolina waterfowlers were pursuing Canada geese in late winter. And that's not to say that ducks weren't also being shot, but mostly they were shot incidental to goose hunting. So it's important to understand, what stock of geese we're talking about here. Hunters were targeting Canada geese, as you can see in the range map on the left, Canada geese that breed in Arctic Canada and wintered at that time in very large numbers in coastal North Carolina. And for brevity's sake, I'm going to refer to this stock of geese going forward as AP geese. So moving into up to about the 1930s, it was a very common practice for individuals, guides, and waterfowl hunt clubs to use domesticated flocks of Canada geese to lure wild geese into gunning range. Well, in 1935, an amendment to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act made that practice illegal. And so what happened over time is these domesticated flocks of Canada geese were just released to their own devices to the wild. And, some of these bred and a small population survived over the following decades. So jumping into the 1940s, I found this family photo. This is my grandpa with one of his hunting buddies from World War II. We think from 1948 in Hyde County, North Carolina. And I can remember him telling me stories about that time period. He said, you know, for $2, I could go out and get myself a guide, and that guide would supply a place to hunt, the decoys, a sack lunch, and a pair of hip boots if I needed them. So in respect to Canada goose hunting at that time, it was still king in North Carolina. But, you know, the real heyday of Canada goose hunting in this state occurred during the 1950s and 60s. The hunting was so good, it attracted people from all over. And at that time, Eastern North Carolina, particularly Northeastern North Carolina, was referred to as a goose hunting capital of the world. But unfortunately, hunters at that time didn't realize what was about to happen. This chart shows trends in wintering AP goose numbers in North Carolina from the 60s through the 1980s. As you can see, in 1960, we wintered approximately 180,000 Canada geese, but by the early 70s, when restricted bags were put in place, that number had dropped to less than 40,000. And then by the mid 80s, that number declined again to around 20,000 wintering Canada geese in the state. So this chart shows the numbers of breeding pairs of AP geese observed during spring surveys in the Arctic. The population decline continued from the late 80s through the early 90s. To the point that breeding pair estimates forced the Atlantic Flyway to close the Canada goose season in the Atlantic Flyway in 1992, and it didn't reopen in North Carolina until 2005. So after several years of very good production in 2015, the decline continued. Our current estimates of breeding pairs of AP geese during spring are now at 89,000. And if that decline continues, that declining trend, then if we reach 49,000 breeding pairs, it's possible we would have to close that season again. So this map shows these pins here. You can just ignore the colors. These pins show the locations of wintering AP geese that the Atlantic Flyway has marked right now with GPS transmitters. So the point I want to make here is, regardless of the population decline, well, first I'll say this is a very good representation of the wintering distribution of AP geese currently. And the point I wanted to make is that despite the population decline, winter distributions of AP geese changed in the 80s and 90s, and it shifted away from North Carolina north of the Delmarva region. So regardless whether we can recover this population or not, it's likely or unlikely that any significant numbers of wintering AP geese are likely to ever return to North Carolina. So going back to the early 1980s, in 1983, the commission, this same body, directed staff to begin a Canada goose stocking program with the objective of augmenting hunting opportunity for AP or for Canada geese due to declining numbers of AP geese. So during a 6-year period from 83 to 88, staff went north. We collected approximately 4,600 what was termed at that time problem geese, and transported and released these birds back in North Carolina, primarily on the coast and in the Piedmont. So these geese didn't migrate back to their original locations, and they became the foundation of what we now know as our resident Canada goose population. So this is a map of the distribution by county and district of resident Canada geese in 1988. This is largely a result of the stocking program, and then the residual birds that were left over and released after live decoys were banned in 1935. So moving forward 10 years, you can see that resident geese expanded rapidly from the coastal plain and Piedmont into the mountain region. Distributions were significantly high in the western Piedmont. And by 2009, it was estimated we had approximately 102,000 resident geese statewide. And this distribution you see here is as you can see, very significant numbers of resident geese are in the Piedmont region, and that's pretty intuitive as urban development has expanded. But now we have, or we had in 2009, Canada geese breeding in all 100 counties. So moving forward to 2014, we previously had asked our district biologist to give us these population estimates, but we wanted to base our estimation method on a more standardized survey. So in 2014, we began what we called a population estimation based on band returns. And what we need to do this, first and foremost, is a banded sample of resident geese across North Carolina we capture during the breeding season. And of course, we depend on hunter recoveries of that banded sample. We also need to know what percentage of hunters that actually shoot a banded bird report that banded goose. And then finally, an estimate of total resident goose harvest in the state. So then we can just use a simple relationship between harvest and harvest rate to generate our population estimate. So a little bit about goose banding, how we go about this. Lucky for us, over a 3-year period in June each year, Canada geese have to undergo a full wing feather molt, which leaves them flightless. And lucky for us, again, at that time, they're easily rounded up and captured. So every 3rd year from 2014 through 2024, over 2,000 adult Canada geese were rounded up and banded statewide. And I'm going to pause here and just put up a short video that kind of highlights how we actually go about capturing and banding these geese.
I'm gonna make sure to give you good stuff. I'll make sure to give you good stuff. I'm gonna make sure to give you good stuff. It's supposed to fly. 657 male. Not a male. Took a hit underneath that wing. 657 male. 657 male. 655 is a male, yes. 658? 658 is a male. 658 male. The one hit them? The only one who hit them? 13 male.
Are they?
That one's great. That one's doing great.
Like a band on it? That's one band already on it.
Oh, it is a band.
I didn't think there was any. Restaurant.
The people online did have sound, so.
Okay. Well, given that estimation procedure using banding, we did have some concerns going forward on how this was going to work for us. The first of those concerns was, would we get enough hunter band recoveries to actually generate a reliable population estimate? So this table shows statewide band recovery rates from 2014 through 2024. The band recovery rate is easy calculation. It's basically the total geese recovered divided by the total geese banded. So you can see here the band recovery rates by district. And these range from 15% in the far western part of the state to around 35% in the coastal plain and Piedmont. So that quells the first concern we had. We're certainly getting sufficient band returns, more than enough to generate our population estimate. The second concern we had, since we were banding geese at urban and suburban locations, will geese banded at urban and suburban locations actually move to areas where they will get harvested and reported? So looking at our goose capture sites over the 3 years or 4 years of banding from 2014 to 2024, what we wanted to do is band at sites that were representative of goose habitat across the state. So as you can see from the map, In each district, we actually banded at what we consider rural sites shown in the green diamonds, excuse me, the green triangles, and then urban, suburban locations here referenced with the blue triangles. So in terms of rural sites, this little McDowell County Farm Pond, that's pretty representative of where we banded across the rural areas in the state. And then in terms of urban or suburban sites, they typically were a neighborhood or a municipal park or anywhere that had water and grass nearby. So these are the band recovery rates by site type over the same period. And although we banded similar numbers of geese at both site types, total band recoveries and the band recovery rate was much higher at rural sites, but we did see resident geese banded at urban suburban locations move out to areas open to hunting where they were harvested and the band was reported. Interestingly enough, when we looked at the average distance from banding location to band recovery location, it was similar between the two site types at around 11 to 13 miles. And just to represent this graphically, this is Wake Med Soccer Park, right here in the middle of Cary, as urban as you can get. The orange triangles represent the recovery locations of bands that originated at the soccer park. So you can see that they're not having to move too far out in the landscape before they're available to hunt or harvest. So, and that's again, in this case, about 15 miles. So our final concern I think there's a pretty preconceived notion, particularly by the public, that our goose population is out of control. Is that truly the case? And secondly, using current control methods, can the population be stabilized or reduced? So taking the first question first, this is our resident goose population estimates over the first 3 banding efforts. You can see that the population estimates are very similar and range between 150 and 155,000 adult geese statewide. So these numbers indicate that this population is actually stable, not increasing, not decreasing. And I think it's prudent to ask the question, why is this population stable? And to do so, we need to look at our primary method of control, and that's hunter harvest. Hunter harvest on resident Canada geese is extremely high, almost 40%. In comparison, migrating geese, for example, their harvest rate's only about 5%. So why is that harvest rate so high? It's so high because if you think about it, these geese aren't migrating twice a year, so they're surviving for longer periods of time, and therefore they're on the landscape for longer periods of time and available for harvest. And if we examine the percentage of band recoveries by month of hunting season, we begin to see where that high harvest occurs. So on the right, these are our regulations for the 2024, 2025 Canada goose seasons. Our special September season held statewide in September, obviously. That season is specifically designed to put as much harvest pressure on resident Canada geese as possible, and that's flyway wide. We do this by offering very liberal bag limits of 15 birds a day, and then we offer alternative methods of take, which aren't necessarily available during the regular goose season. These include the use of electronic calls, the use of unplugged guns, and shooting 30 minutes past sunset. And you can see, although our regular Canada goose season is a bit longer, 30 days longer, so to speak, I think about right. The bag limit's much lower at 5 birds a day. So as a population manager, what I want to see is the highest harvest occurring in September when we have these liberal bag limits, can take a lot of birds. And that's actually what's happening. You can see here that our band recoveries during the months of September are almost 40% compared to the other months. So as a population manager, I'm very happy about that. And I think going forward, it's very, very important for us to continue to put that type of pressure on these resident geese as a control method during the month of September. I do want to talk about another control method that's out there. This is a program, a Fish and Wildlife Service program that allows nests and eggs to be removed and destroyed. This allows landowners to actually take goose problems into their own hands without, having to call us, get a complicated permit, so on and so forth. through just a simple e-permit system. And why this is important on a statewide basis, if we can limit the numbers of goslings entering the fall population, we can combine that with our very high harvest rate and actually limit population growth. We do have other control methods, although they probably don't move the needle in terms of population control, like hunter harvest and nest and egg destruction, but we do have the ability to issue agricultural depredation permits in the spring to farmers who are experiencing crop depredation. And then we do have the ability to do lethal control through USDA where the situation warrants, for example, on airports where there's a safety concern. And so to wrap this up, 125 years of Canada goose history in North Carolina. It's very unfortunate that we lost the AP goose population, and we find ourselves as a flyway and waterfowl population managers in recovery mode. But even if we do recover that population, as I mentioned previously, it's very unlikely that we'll ever see the numbers of wintering AP geese we did in the 1950s and 1960s. And now moving to the goose stocking program. If the objective of that program at the time was to augment hunting opportunity due to declining numbers of AP geese, I think you can step back to today and say that program was a resounding success. But as we all know, increasing numbers of resident geese come with their own problems. So I find myself, as a population manager now in control mode. Our population, while it's currently stable, is above our stated management goal. But what we have in place that we didn't have back in the day is a very good method to precisely estimate trends in this population over time with our goose banding. So going forward, our management objective is to keep this population where it is now or even lower towards the stated management goal. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the presentation. If there's time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, that was a very informative presentation. At this time, I'll ask, are there any questions for Doug?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, John.
What do you tell people who call you up and say, sir, I've got this golf course and they're all over the darn place? What am I've got this municipal lake and they're all over the place and they're creating a big mess. What can I do?
The first thing I direct them to do is to register with the Fish and Wildlife Service e-permit system and allow them to take nest and eggs. A second alternative would be to hire someone that had, like, for example, border collies to haze if that needed to be done. But those are, our two primary control methods for the public.
You wouldn't have something like archery season or whatever else around there just to try to get rid of the rest, because what you just talked about doesn't really take care of the population itself around these golf courses and municipal ponds.
Well, as I mentioned, they do move to areas open to hunting in September. So rather than try to implement something directly on the golf course that's above and beyond the control methods I mentioned, then we rely on that harvest as those birds move in September, in particular, out to crops that are being harvested, particularly corns and soybeans. So thus far, it seems to be working if you measure that success in terms of population that's not growing.
David, Doug, what's the life expectancy of a resident goose versus the wild migratory?
It's much higher. We've actually recovered bands of our own from 2014. So what's that? It's 11 years. And we've recovered bands from other states that were over 25 years old. So the life expectancy of a resident goose is much higher than you would expect to see from a migrating goose.
So do you have a good recipe to make them taste better?
Hold your nose. Maybe I'm not fond of resident geese, but I do like geese.
Question is, most of the geese that I know that get shot get thrown in the dumpster.
They get shot.
Thrown in the dumpster.
Oh, okay.
Is there any outlet, or is there any talk of any outlets that, and I know it's not what we're supposed to do, but is there any outlets for food or like the
like Hunters for the Hungry
Yeah,
or
right.
one of those programs. There are, I'm not sure how many people take advantage of that, but they are legally able to donate those geese to places like that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Judge,
How many depredation permits do y'all issue from April through August?
Statewide, probably less than 100.
And do you issue them to people other than farmers, such as a golf course or a neighborhood?
No, we don't. Not that particular permit. It's designed for agricultural depredation. If they have issues, they generally, we tend to direct them to the USDA, particularly APHIS. APHIS is the lead agency on handling, specifically goose problems in the state.
and
Yeah, thank you. No, that was a great study there, and just it's interesting seeing like you said, the Atlantic flyway versus the residents. Are there a lot of other species that are similar to this? Like, I want to say black ducks. We have a lot of more resident black ducks than we used to, or I guess maybe love to see a follow-up of other species or migratory birds that where we've kind of had to subsidize the natural progression.
Yeah, for migratory game birds, we haven't done that outside Canada geese. Specifically for black ducks, we did do about a 7 to 8 year study on our resident population. I looked at, their distribution, their numbers, their nest success, and then finally the genetic makeup of that population to understand if we have genetic introgression from mallards coming into that population. And that's something I haven't presented to you, but it would be, I think, very interesting for you to hear some of those results.
any further questions?
Quick comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Great presentation.
Thank
So could you tell us when you're flying surveys and counting birds, how you're doing that and how you're recording the data? Like,
Yeah.
how are you recording the data as you fly?
Obviously, it's in a fixed wing aircraft. Within the aircraft, there's a recording system that's been developed over the last 10 years. So it's hooked into the speaker system in the aircraft. So when you come by, it's a cruise survey. So you're just cruising or on a transect, observing the numbers of geese in this case. And then you push a button, 10,000 Canada geese, 500 Canada geese. And it records that information with a GPS location in that hardware. And then we can take that after the survey and download that and then transcribe it and put together our final numbers based upon where we saw the birds and how many we saw.
Come a long way.
It's come a very long way. Yep.
Any further questions? Doug, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now we'll move forward. I recognize Ben Solomon, our Assistant Chief Land and Acquisition Manager, to present land acquisition property matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. We'll have land acquisition and property committees for today. Land acquisition and property matters for today will include 2 phase 1s, phase 2 proposals, as well as 2 other property matters. We'll begin with our phase 2 proposals. The first is Exhibit C1. This is the Ransom Road Tract in Haywood County. This is a 97-acre acquisition that will provide a site for the relocation of our Balsam Depot. Exhibit C2 is the Bell Tract in Pender County. This acquisition will fill an in-holding at Holly Shelter Game Land and is a donation from our partner, Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail. Land Acquisition and Property Committee and staff would like to recommend approval of Exhibits C1 and C2.
This time I'll entertain a motion in a second to adoption approval of C1 and C2. A motion from Barry, second. Davis, is there any questions now? We have a motion on the floor. Any comments? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adoption of C. All those in favor of adoption of C1 and C2, it's a motion called for, signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries.
We'll move forward to our other property matters. We have 2 for today, Exhibit D1 and Exhibit D2. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll present the 2 separately. Exhibit, okay.
Got a recusal on D2. Right?
Yes, sir. Exhibit D1 is the Sandhills Game Land easement request. This is a request from a private landowner for ingress, egress, and utilities easement. And Commission and the LAP Committee would like to recommend granting an express easement to this landowner. Staff and the Land Acquisition and Property Committee would like to recommend approval of Exhibit D1.
This time I'll entertain the motion to set second for the adoption of D1 as presented.
So moved.
Motion. Mike Alford, is there a second? Second from Jim Ruffin. Is there any further discussion? We went over this extensively today.
I got one question. Is there any chance of another route in or out other than our easement?
Excuse me. Please stay tight.
Is there another, instead of granting an easement, is there another way for the landowner to get in and out? If we're granting an easement, I'm assuming that road's already there. I understand that. Is there another way the landowner could put a road in?
We've discussed that, and my understanding is that we'll defer to Ben to give the final answer, but there is not.
Correct.
All I wanted to know.
Correct.
Thank you.
Here now, I got a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion on the here none, all those in favor of adopting of Exhibit D1 is presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved.
Moving forward to Exhibit D2, this is a DOT right-of-way request for a permanent right-of-way and a temporary construction easement for a bridge replacement project impacting Shockoe Creek Game Land. And staff and Land Acquisition and Property Committee would like to recommend approval of Exhibit D2.
Time I'll entertain the motion in a second, the adoption of Exhibit D2 as presented, noting the recusal by Commissioner Zimmer. So moved. Barry and Wendell, any further discussion? Hear none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Haywood. White Lake.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We only have one water safety rulemaking exhibit today, and that is found in Exhibit E2. This is a request for adoption of a permanent amendment to 15A NCAC 10F.0304 Bladen County at White Lake. And adoption of this permanent rule amendment will prohibit motorboats from traveling parallel to the shoreline and instead at perpendicular to the shoreline and at no wake speed only within the restricted area at White Lake. And this will be to mitigate hazards to swimmers and non-motorized boaters within the area. Staff recommends your consideration of adoption.
Need a motion and second, adoption of Exhibit E2. Wyndham and who? Bud. Wyndham and Bud. Any further discussion? Hear none, all those in favor, motion to approve Exhibit E2, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Gary Rubin.
Thank you.
Gary.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I have temporary rule amendments to Rule 15A NCAC 10F0307. This is exhibits F1 and F2. As discussed yesterday at the Committee of the Whole, these amendments are safety requirements for vessel liveries operating on Lake Norman to assist with enforcement and safety issues on that lake. Staff recommend approval of the temporary amendments.
This time I'll entertain a motion and second for the adoption approval, Exhibit F2. Presented. And motion from Hall and second by Alexander. Alexander. Any further comments or questions? Dave? Hear none, all those in favor of the motion to adopt Exhibit F2, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Christian Water, temporary rulemaking, sea travel. Discussed at length yesterday, reference again today in fishing committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Exhibit G is a temporary rule, as discussed yesterday in the Fisheries Committee meeting. Staff recommends approval of Exhibit G to notice text for this temporary rule.
I'm going to accept the motion and second for the adoption of Exhibit G as presented by Christian Water.
I'll make that motion.
Got it. Mr. Stone, seconded by Wyndham. Is any further discussion, deliberation on this? Hearing none, all those in favor of the adoption of Exhibit G, the sea trial temporary rulemaking notice of text, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Here. At this time, just a couple comments. I mentioned it yesterday about how well our staff does managing our resources based on science and biology. We saw another good example today where we were so good, we've got a problem with recovery. But we're working on it. But it's just to credit our staff, a commitment over decades of work. We saw also how quickly our staff in Western North Carolina have worked to get a hatchery back up and going, having a hatchery plan, because we know the economic benefit of our hatchery program to put trout, North Carolina, Western North Carolina stream, how crucial that is to the economy of Western North Carolina, to the tune of $1 billion. And, you know, the work of our staff that goes on, it's just phenomenal. I wanted to lift that up and once again to speak to how well that goes. Also, on behalf of the commission, I want to wish Landon Zimmer well. This is gets married this weekend and leaves being a bachelor. But we're glad that you had time to finish up all your duties this week before you took your neutrals. And we wish you well.
He's not making a lot of decisions about this, man. I can tell you that, other than to be there.
But okay, we wish you well, Landon, and congratulations. Thank you. And also, this is our first meeting with a new executive director. He's off to a good start. Obviously, he's been heavily involved in what we've been working on with the legislature. I already made critical contacts. To no surprise, that he would hit the ground running with his institutional knowledge, his experience, dedication to the Wildlife Commission. So we're off to a good start, and we appreciate that. That's all my business.
And how about the new deputy director?
He's going to mention that.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, I want to thank all the commissioners for their confidence in me and putting me in this position. It's a very clean one. I don't remember a January that went by quite so fast. And I appreciate all the calls and all of the advice I've gotten. Also do want to thank staff, especially Deputy Director Brian and Lisa, for all their help in trying to help get me settled into the new position, and of course, Margot. And I will take this opportunity, as Commissioner Alexander, to mention our new Chief Deputy will be starting Monday. Christian Waters is moving over into that position, and look forward to what he's going to bring to the team and yeah, moving conservation and the needle forward that Cam started and that y'all put us on the path forward. Thank y'all so much. Yes, sir.
One thing quickly I failed to mention is we're moving into summer camp. We're there.
Yes, sir.
We should be fully in this week. Therefore, we'll be setting up an opportunity for ribbon cutting for the commissioners to come down finally to cut the ribbon, so you can see this wonderful, great facility. I've had the opportunity to visit many times during construction, and I hope it looks a whole lot better than it did last time I was there, and I assume that it does. And we'll be getting in touch with you to line that up, and we'll have a luncheon, ribbon cut, and have an opportunity to come see that. Like I said, a great facility. So is there any further business? Hearing none, meeting adjourned.